Hello everybody, Dawkins here. Hope you're having a fantastic day. So this is the intro, if you will, for the start of my grading series that I wanted to put together for myself and also for the community. I submitted two really large orders into CGC at the beginning of 2021, and I'm just starting to get those back in bulk. So I'm like up to my eyeballs in slabs right now. Which is a good thing. I'm not complaining. But I thought it would be a great opportunity to not only document that process for myself for future me of how to do things better or mistakes that I made, things like that, but also just a way, because so many of the cards are similar, that we can see. It might be helpful to see, like, here's an 8.5 versus a 9, and here's a 9 versus a 9.5, just to kind of get a better handle, if you will, on the differences in the grading cards. Or in the grades for cards. This is right now I'm mostly dealing just with CGC for the bulk because PSA still has my cards. I use both of them, full disclosure. I like both of them. I dislike things about both of them. It's not a shilling for either company or anything. I think they're both great and have their place. I don't really use the other grading companies. Nothing against them, just so far PSA and CGC have kind of filled my needs, I guess, for lack of other words. So before we get started, I thought it might be helpful to just show the differences in some of the differences of the cases. I've got an old PSA label, so it's in the 200s, versus a fairly new one in the 600s, just so you can see the differences in the cases themselves from old to new. Labels have changed a lot. The little sticker here, that's different. They're maybe a little frostier with that frosting around there than they used to be, but pretty similar. Similar thickness, same size, which is helpful to know. Like, sometimes the grading companies will shift a little bit and the sleeves that you use to hold them may not fit the new ones or anything, so I just thought I'd point that out. And then the differences between the CGC. There's well, first, between Pokemon and CGC, or Pokemon, PSA and CGC, the cases themselves, the CGC ones are a little bit thicker, just slightly. So this is the PSA on the right. It's a little bit thinner, but the same width and same height to them. So if you get a sleeve that fits a CGC case, it's going to fit a PSA case, and pretty much vice versa. The only concern I would have, because you can see they're just a little bit thicker, if you had a sleeve that was like super snug on the PSA, it might be a little bit too tight on your CGCs, but I haven't run into that issue yet. I haven't found any like perfect fit sleeves that are just like really snug on the cases. But so yeah, and then even though they're still a fairly new to grading trading card company, their labels have recently changed. So if you see a label like this, that doesn't necessarily mean it's bad or that it's fake or anything. It's just that they're changing their labels. So this is an older one that I graded. I got this back, I want to say, maybe 4 or 5 months ago, versus this one just came in a couple months ago. So they've just changed the labels in the meantime. Still the same thickness and everything. Nothing else has changed. The label on the backs is the same, just like just a little bit of color gradient here in this area. But I thought that was interesting. For this grading series, this is not going to be one of those where I like make you wait to reveal it and then ta-da! It's not going to be one of those videos at all. There are no base set Charizard 10s in here. Spoiler, I know, shocker. These are all just cards that I sent in on the bulk tier that I got in. Some of them were in my collection and had been there for a long time, and had always kind of wanted to grade them. Others I was thinking of grading to increase their value and potentially sell them. So all of these cards were graded at like less than $8 a piece. And at that rate, it's kind of like, why not for almost all cards, in my opinion. Not all of them, but a really good percentage, because you can just increase the value of the card for reselling. So where applicable, where I've got multiple ones, I'll show you the differences, or we'll look at them to see if we can tell why a grade got a certain, or why a card got a certain grade. I might also just take a minute just to look at the cards, because it's been over a year, or yeah, since I've seen them, and I missed some of them. So, all right, so this is a 9. I'm hoping that by the end of this, we'll have a better sense of looking at a card, knowing what grading company we're going to be using, and then being able to gauge, is this card going to pull a 9 for me? Is it only going to get an 8 or a 7? Will it possibly get a 10? Like that kind of information to help us make better decisions on whether or not we want to send in cards to grade or not. Like that, whether we want to send in that particular card to grade. All right. It's another 9. There. Take a look up close. Hopefully the camera can get in good. So you can see there's no visible scratching anywhere. That can get you. All it takes is one little ding. There's like denting that can happen on them. Little dings that are hard to see with the naked eye. And then take a look sideways to see if you can see any dents in the card. But it's for me still, I'm still learning. This was the first submission that I sent. I've sent in some at a higher tier, so I got them back faster. But this was my first experience of sending cards in to have them graded. So I'm still learning about, oh, nope, you thought that was going to be a 9, that's actually going to be an 8, right? So we'll kind of learn this as we go. Centering looks pretty good on this one. I'm not seeing anything that jumps out to me as to why. Well, that's on the case. There we go. When you get these back from the grading companies, there's going to be, for lack of better words, schmutz on them, so you'll have to clean those off. But yeah, I'm not seeing anything. Let's see, these are all 3 9s here. So we'll go through these a little bit quicker when there's not anything to compare it with. Another Weavile. I like the CGC cases because they click in when they don't have a sleeve on them. This is from the Neo Premium file, like a little folder thing where you get the 9 cards. I love Crocodile. I tried to grab boxes that had the same card but in different grades in it, just so we could get a better comparison of them. What is this, Latios? Potentially be a fairly long series, like with many parts to it. I mean, I could try to keep the videos in like the 10 or so minute range, maybe 15. Well, I tell you, when Pokemon put sparkles all over the card, it's like they're making it just for me. I love these cards so much. Side guard. CGC is very stingy for giving 10s. Like, don't want to be too controversial, but it's like it's almost to the point where they're doing it on purpose. It's just like, wow, like why? There are so many 9.5s that I get from them that I'm just wondering, like, why couldn't this have been a 10? I want grading companies to be strict for sure. It's weird to say this. I just wish they would loosen up just a tad. Like, man, like you feel like you won the lotto when you get a 10. Part of that is my inexperience in sending in cards, for sure. But when you're opening something, like it's packed fresh, the centering looks good, you're not seeing any whitening or anything like that, and looking at it with a jeweler's loop and there's no dings anywhere that you can find, and then it still doesn't get a 10, it'll get a 9.5. That can be a little frustrating. Not gonna sugarcoat that one, but this is what it is. Oh, look at that Selby. Sorry, I'm gonna totally like fangirl out on some of these cards. Overall, I did pretty well on the grades. I got a few that were surprises of like things that I missed when I sent them in. Like I was expecting them to get a better grade. I sent most of these in with the expectation, with the hope that I would get an 8 or better. Just to give you an idea of what cards I tend to send in to get graded. Unless it's something like a base Charizard. Like Charizard, I'll almost grade everything of. Pikachu also gets a little bit more leeway. You know, the heavy hitters. I've kind of leaned more towards specializing in cards that you may not see a lot of on the market. They're not going to pull a ton of money in resale value, but I'm also not going to have a lot of competition. And I figure that, like, I like loose cards and cards in binders, but I also like graded cards, and I figure that there's a market, even though it's smaller, for, say, cards like this than there are for like the base set or WotC cards, things like that. You just need to find those couple of buyers that might want them and appreciate them and be able to have a slabbed Shaman from Dreamshine in their collection. I love this series so much. If after you've watched this first one, if there's something you'd like me to do differently, if I'm spending too much time on each card or not enough, just let me know in the comments. Because this, like I said, this is as much about me trying to give something to the community as it is for myself in making these videos for like future reference for me. When I first started collecting, I wanted to grade, but I was so intimidated about sending them in. I didn't know like how to gauge the cards, or I was intimidated by the mailing process and even just the filling out the form online. So it took a long time for me to kind of get up the guts to do it. Finally did, and I guess I'm not a fan of half measures. When I do something, I just dive right in. Part of it was the probably the biggest driving factor was knowing that CGC was most likely going to be raising their prices. So grading cards like this one, for instance, would probably not be an option at the $15 to $20 rate that we're seeing now in so many of the grading companies. So I just kind of went through my whole collection, pulled out the ones that I thought would be like 8 plus, mostly 9s or better, and just sent them all in. Just ripped the band-aid off and just did it. Shaman. The Best of XY series was such a good one. But so yeah, back to my point. Sorry, I went to rambling. I get distracted with the cards. They, if there's something else that you'd like to see or like to see me do differently, please let me know in the comments, because these videos are just as much for you as they are for me. So you will see a lot of 9.5s. Well, not a lot, but quite a few. Will we see any 10s? I'm gonna keep that one in my back pocket until we get through this a little bit more. I started with a stack that doesn't have any differences in the grades, of course. Way to go, Dawkins. Way to go. Mega Septile. See, I challenge you to tell me why something like these last two cards wouldn't get a 10. Not seeing any dings. Because typically, if it's close enough, if it's a 9.5, it's not going to have any like weird surface things to it, because that would bring it down more. It could be the centering. I think they're a little more strict on the centering than PSA is, so that might be what's keeping some of these, because that won't ding a card a lot, but it will bring it down a little. Alright, so we got a 9 versus a 9.5 in the exact same card. So here's the 9. At this level of card, it doesn't matter, it doesn't impact it as much. But if you're looking at a high-end card, you could be talking hundreds of dollars of difference between a 9 and a 9.5. 9.5 even and a 10 could be many, many hundreds of dollars, depending on how rare those 10s are. Alright, so that's the 9, and then here's the 9.5. So it's a little bit better, but still not good enough to get us a 10. Figuring out what cards to send in will vary a little bit depending on if something's in my collection versus purchasing it. And because if it's in my collection, especially if it's been there a while, it's kind of like, I don't know what the crossover is, but at some point it's like free. I haven't spent anything on it because it's been so long ago that I will be more likely to send in a card that's in my collection to grade than I would for the same card. If it's like, if I know the resale value on it is not going to be very high, I want to make sure that I'm covering my grading costs. And if you're covering your grading costs, you also want to make sure that you're covering the cost to purchase the card. So that makes it a little harder for cards that I buy. A little more strict with those. Camerupt. Alright, so that's the first step. Get this out of the way. Alright, I'm going to cut it there, and we'll start this stack. Next time, I promise there's going to be better cards for us to compare. More 8s and halves and 9s, 9 and halves, things like that. Alright, so let me know in the comments what you think about this. Thank you for watching. We'll talk to you soon. If anybody asks, let them know Dawkins was here. Bye-bye.